most of you know Jeannie O'Farrell, and I've known her since 1991. And she's been when she joined the church, and she's been very active from the beginning. I'm sure you've read whatever was all the little blurb that was sent indicating everything she's been doing lately. But there are several things she's done before that nobody mentioned. The fact is she was very involved in the women's retreat, actually, when it was in person. And on a personal level, she's been wonderful with my mother, and my mother loved her very much, and she loved my mother's artwork, and even her cats loved my mother. So we have a very personal attachment to each other. So here you go to a wonderful person, Jeannie. Take it from there on.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I was in the Peace Corps from 1971 to 1973, and there was a trip I wanted to take that this is based on. But for this program, I never thought of showing this program, but Nicole and I were in this memoir writing class offered by Martha Spalding. And Nicole loved the story I told about the part of the trip from Ouagadougou, which is the capital of Burkina Faso, a landlocked country north of Ghana, to Niamey and back down through Benin. And she loved the stories I wrote about that. So I have to remember, I'm going to read that section, which is brief, but it just capture how enraptured I was with this experience. But let's start out here. This first picture is actually—
Jeannie, you're covering your text.
What? Oh, my text. Thank you. Thank you. I need to be reminded of that. This is from Accra, Ghana, which Accra is on the coast of Ghana in West Africa. It's the capital. To Niamey, the capital of Niger, which is to the north and to the east of Ghana, landlocked country. 80% of it is Sahara Desert. So it's very, very different from anything I had ever seen before or after. And then we came back, but through Benin, which used to be Dahomey and is on the coast of West Africa. And the water there is called the Gulf of Guinea. It's part of the Atlantic Ocean. To there and back with friends, Genevieve and Joan, two other Peace Corps volunteers. Genevieve was my roommate, December and January of 1972, while we were all Peace Corps volunteers. So this photograph is from the town that I lived in. Wait a minute, I'm just going to set this for 11:50 so that I don't run over. But I'm also going to set this for about 10 minutes from now so that I stop and read if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Thank you. So this is during Harmattan, spelled Harmattan, and it's the name of the cool, dry wind that blows across the Sahara from north to south into the Gulf of Guinea every year between the end of November and the middle of March, which is the abrupt start of the rainy season. It parches everything in its path. It coats everything in dust. The further up you are towards the desert and in the desert, the more sand you get. So you can get almost a silicosis from the sand in your lungs. So it doesn't just sweep away the earth, almost like the Dust Bowl out in the Midwest. It also gets into your lungs and causes the lung infections that people in the Dust Bowl had, but also people who work in sandstone, work with that, can get that. It's not entirely benign. Okay. And we lived there. So this was taken by a Peace Corps volunteer who lived upstairs for me. This is West Africa, so we know what we're talking about. Went to these countries and down through here. The trip started here on the coast, went up to here, the middle of Burkina Faso, which at the time was called Upper Volta, landlocked country, into Niger now, and back down through Benin. These are very, very poor countries. They are sparsely inhabited, but apparently Niger has 24 million people. It's hard to believe there will be that many because there are vast areas of it that are just vacant, because there's a big desert, the Tenere Desert here, but this is Sahel, this is all of Algeria. It's quite large. What is Ghana named after? This is the Empire of Ghana from 830 to 1235. Ghana, the country we're going through, where I lived, is here. But the name was invited by Kwame Nkrumah, who was a great liberator of Ghana. He promoted the independence of Ghana. He was opposed to the colonialists there. These were British colonialists there and in Nigeria. All around us were French colonies, former French colonies. So their languages were French. Like this is Ivory Coast. This is Mali up here, which includes Timbuktu. Niger is over there. Togo and Benin were former French colonies in here. And Nigeria was British. So that very much affected the cultures there. This is the size of the United States compared to Africa. Africa is about 4 times the size of it. 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, this area up here was humid. It was during the humid period of Africa. And there are petroglyphs up in the middle of the Sahara Desert that are of giraffes carved into rock. And they're also drawn there. They're exposed to the elements and have survived, except when they were discovered, they've been known about by the people in the desert. The Peace Corps volunteers were informed of them and went to see them, but there are now a lot of tourists, not right this minute, but there were tourists in the past 20 years there. And some of them have vandalized them and defaced them, which is very sad. But they're quite fascinating. And there are dinosaur bones out here exposed. It's still there. There are dinosaur footprints out there that are exposed. They can't do a lot about them now because there's so many terrorists there now. We were there at a time when there weren't terrorists there. There were other dangers, but certainly nothing like what has captured them. Here's Ghana. I went from here up to Kamasi, the center of the Ashanti area. They will tell you they are the most important tribe in Ghana. They are a very proud people. They've been connected with their wealth from gold. There are a lot of gold mines here. The Bono people who came there discovered gold, and it became very wealthy and economically and politically influential in West Africa, but they were not a warmongering. I mean, it isn't they wouldn't fight wars, they just didn't want to start them. So they did more by their political and economic influence. But this is where we went, this way up to here. And then up here is what was Upper Volta, now Burkina Faso. This is a climate map, so this matters. Dark green, or it's medium green there on the screen, is rainforest. And up above it is coastal forest. Then there's, up above it is deciduous forest. And then the sand or savanna area is this area in here. And up above it is the Sahel, which means south of the desert. Sahara means desert, I think in Arabic. This is south of the desert. My experience was different from this map. I'll show you what my experience was more like. It's more like this. See, this is Sahel, this gray area. All of this up here, even further south, was gravel and some sand, bare mountains, scrub brush, maybe. It was not the green Africa, the healthy looking Africa that I see in the pictures made for tourists. It looked quite desolate. The rainforest, you know what that looks like if you've been to Florida or down into the islands in any tropical area. Savannah is the sandy land, and these are the huts that you would see all through this area, sort of here, right across, you'd see these round mud huts. So that was what we would call the Savannah. What I saw was this when I went from Ouagadougou to Niamey. This is what it looked like, even more sparsely. There were even fewer plants than this. It's a harsh land. There are no roads. We navigated, well, I didn't navigate by the stars, but apparently the drivers did. There's some people down here and back over there. There's a little bit over here. It's a little bit of a village. Some people sitting over here. This is desert, and this is a memorial to those who have died crossing the desert. For good luck, vehicles are asked to drive around it 3 times. On the other side of this, just 100 feet away, is an oasis. That's what an oasis looks like. There are a few people living around there, but see, it's not heavily populated, and it's a very difficult land to make your way in. This is closer up in the oasis where there is a well built, very important. This is desert, dunes, barren rock. Not so pretty here. Swept, and you can see there are tracks from trucks going by, but there's not a road. And that matters because you get stuck in the sand. This is Genevieve and Steve. Genevieve was my roommate. She is from Savannah, Georgia, but she lives in Atlanta, and she and I had a lot of adventures while we were there. One is everywhere we went, she would have her hair plaited and how it was done there. Nigeria was the most interesting. They had fabulous designs for the hair, but it would take 4 or 5 hours to have it done. So I had a lot of pictures, but alas, my pictures are gone. I had a bad story. They got infested in a building I was living in, and I had to discard them all. And so these are all photographs from my friends who I put out an all points bulletin on our email list. And a lot of them said, oh, Jeannie, I don't know where they are. Oh, Jeannie, I can't even look through them. But a few of them have been more industrious, and they have shared these with me, which I'm very glad of, because it would be hard to give this talk without doing that. This is Steve Merlow, a friend of mine who lives in San Diego. We would often drag him along, 4 women and Steve, to travel in places where we're not as hospitable to women on their own. And he would tell them these were his 4 wives, and they were thrilled. They thought he was a good man. So that was, and we would all stay in the same hotel room, but there were so many of us on a double bed, we'd sleep sideways and just flex our knees to hang off the edge of the bed. And these were very uncomfortable nights. I don't think we got any sleep. Okay. Let me see if there are any questions down here. Are there any questions in chat yet, Miriam? Okay, good. This is the University of Ghana at Legon. It was built by the Japanese. There was a doctor who was a researcher in yellow fever, and he lived in Ghana for a long time and actually died of yellow fever. This was built in 1948. I don't know if you can see over here. It's actually, you can't see over here. Yeah, you can. This has a Japanese style to it. These don't, but there is an institute here for clinical work that is named after him. This is downtown Accra in 1971. My friend Jim said that was Peter Baldo, a friend of ours, one of the volunteers. These are just Ghanaians walking downtown. See, a lot of people walk sort of out in the street. The buildings are not tall. These are nicely built, but you'd see buildings higher, but you didn't really see any high-rise buildings. This was not a big place, but it was big enough. I mean, we walking around here rather than pay for a taxi, we would just walk all day. And we could easily put in 5-7 miles in a day walking. let me see, where are we here? This is a woman in Accra at a bus stop wearing native dress, lovely cloth, very neatly dressed. She's going someplace important. That was something you would see frequently. People nicely dressed, waiting for buses. This is another part of Accra. It's more poor. These ditches here are gutters that were built. They're part of the infrastructure in cities that have better infrastructure because they catch the runoff of water during the rainy season, which can be incredible amount of water. But people could run their cars into them and get their tires stuck in there, and people can fall in them. They're about 2 feet deep. This is a kiosk where you could buy newspapers, a bottled drink of some sort, like Coca-Cola. You could get a snack, you could get cigarettes, newspapers, other kinds of things there, maybe a can of sardines or tomato paste or some crackers, something like that. This is an important place in Ghana: Black Star Square, Independence Arch. Now we're going to leave through the rainforest. This is rainforest, which you've seen evidence of in Florida, the tropical rainforest, or jungle as we call it. This is a good road, though it's a dirt road, but notice the red tinge to the clay. And that's important because in Hamilton, in the middle of the day, if you're in a sandstorm, looks red, blood red. This is a town which actually, it may look very poor with the corrugated roofs, but it's a better off town because these are buildings that are painted. They're not mud huts. They've got wide streets here. And this is taken from the train track. Wait a minute, let me turn this down here. I just need to turn this down. Okay. There's a lot of logging in the rainforest, which is destroying it. That and the cocoa farming, because cocoa in Ghana and Ivory Coast are major industries. Probably most of the world's cocoa comes from those two countries. So people cleared the forest in order to raise cocoa. This is a silk cotton tree that's also, it's like a banyan tree. It grows very rapidly, 80 feet tall, 8 feet diameter in places, logged a lot. The wood is not dense. It isn't like ebony that's very dense. And there was a lot of ebony in West Africa, a lot of carvings made from ebony. But these are immense. And you see, well, I'll show you this. This is my friend Jim. I don't know if you can see this man standing here. This is he sent me this. If you look, he's about a little bit taller than this arrow. So you put him here and he's a little bit taller than that. This is a very wide tree. It's quite a big tree. Here they are, the tracks. See how immense the diameter is. Now we're up, we've gone past Kamasi at this point, which is a big city, a big commercial center. There's a lot of activity there. And as I said, it's the center of the Ashanti area. And someplace I would go, living about 2 hours from there. I'd go there if I needed some particular supplies or something. This is Techiman, again, my town, with another lovely sunset done by Leverett. Because Techiman, the location of it, was at the end of the rainforest and the beginning of the Savannah, it was drier. So you wouldn't have as much mist, although we had torrential rains in the rainy season. Occasionally during Hamilton, we'd get a sunset like this. 20 miles away, where some friends of mine lived, these were way back in the bush, but these are nice buildings showing this town is more wealthy than other towns. They're painted, they're 2 stories. They have their fences. Yes, they're corrugated iron, but they're nicely built. These are 2 of my friends from there who are Peace Corps friends. And this is Pat's house. She was a teacher there. Now it's her house. There was no plumbing, no electricity. But those are the things you got used to very quickly. The center of the house was a courtyard. This is not her house. This is Milton. He was another guy in the town. So you might have 4 families living in there out of 2 rooms each. And Pat, because she was a teacher, got 2 rooms of her own, though she was single. In the corner of it was a latrine, a wooden bench with a hole in it covered with a top on hinges, and there was a bucket under it, and the night soil man would come around nightly and empty the bucket. And they used that to put on crops. So we had to soak everything, all vegetables and fruits, we had to soak in a Clorox solution so we wouldn't get sick. This friend discovered from these 2 people that he was from the town that they lived in. They lived in the same town in upstate New York. He's a physician who had set up a practice there in upstate New York. So they became fast friends. He's wearing a very beautiful piece of cloth called a dinkra. These designs are for proverbs. They mean something. They're made with ink stamped on. There's stamps made like this. And this is woven cloth sewn onto it. There's another beautiful cloth called Kenticott that the Ashantis are famous for, and it's woven in strips and quite beautiful designs. And the cloth robes worn predominantly by men 50 years ago were made out of that. And I'll show you some pictures here. This was the chief's house in a place called Barakum over near the Ivory Coast border in the center of the cocoa area. Also the center where the elephants are. This area, Brangahafo, is known for elephants. Hini, Oman Hini. So Oman would be like a first or last name. Hini means king. So the Ashanti Hini would be the king of the Ashanti. So Oman Hini, I don't know if that was added to his own name or what, but this part of it, H-E-N-E, meant chief. These umbrellas are decorative. They're part of their culture. These men are drumming. Notice all the men have their right shoulder bared. It was a sign of respect for people who are above their station in life. Even the king, or the chief there, see, he's got the gold crown on. Even he would have his right shoulder bared as a part of respect. In this photograph, you can see him sitting here in state as the chief of them. Over here is a man with some more gold on his hair with his right shoulder bared. He's wearing kente. They're both wearing kente. You can't see it that well. He's the linguist. So to speak to the chief, you would have to speak to the linguist, and he would speak to the chief. So regular common people could not speak directly to the chief. If you needed something in the town, you would go to the linguist and ask for something, and he would decide if you were worthy of being taken care of or not. Here we go, just more people. You can see evidence of Coca-Cola there. The people with the white hats on, these and white clothing, these we were informed were Muslims for the north of Ghana. This was a festival, so they would be dressed in white. It was an important occasion, and they would always be wearing their hats as a sign of respect. It's, sorry. Any questions so far, Miriam? Okay. This is me right there in the center. These are Peace Corps volunteers and people from the village. We built a school in August of 1972 in a town. We did manual labor. There were some guys in our group who knew how to build buildings, and they laid it out. And okay, so now we're going to go north again into the Savannah, and we're going in a lorry. This is a truck. It would have these proverbs written on the side. People would be sitting in there on benches. It would be a very rocky, jostling ride. The trucks would often break down. But we're going to the north of Ghana now into an area. This is the Savannah. It didn't look quite like that. It looked scrubbier. You wouldn't see as much, but also at the time of year, they would have burned a lot of the grass off at that time to prepare for the rains that would be coming. And would prepare the land because there would be massive flooding, and they wanted to capture as much of the water as they could. We are now in Tamale, which is in northern Ghana. It's an important city there. Not a big one by any means. It's more like a large town 50 years ago. This is the market. This man makes fugus, which are these, I'll show you. This is what they look like. One of the guys is wearing one here. It's very loose. And this man makes them. Here's his Singer sewing machine. It's a pedal. There was no electricity attached to this. And he was selling this. He's wearing a cloth print. He's not wearing one of these. This is a place we dearly loved, Old Man's Chop Bar. Chop means meal. So we would go there to get a meal when we were in town, and there would be one meal served there. There wasn't really any place to sit down. Everybody would get the same meal there that day, and it would be a stew, maybe often made with goat's meat. And it would have groundnut paste in it or peanut butter because there's so many peanuts grown there. It would, they would be ground up into a paste and roasted and part of the stew, very nutritious. It would have onions and eggplant, maybe some greens in it, lots of ginger, fresh ginger, lots of red pepper. We would often ask them to tone down the pepper, but it was just really hard for them to cook without putting in so much pepper. And we eventually got more used to the pepper, but it was really fiery. This is just another vision of it with some friends of mine from Peace Corps who gave me these pictures. This is a wonderful picture that Clark Smith did of the old man. And this is his son. This is the old man. That was, everyone called him old man. And the volunteers who went back to visit 10 years later in 1983 went to see him. He had died, but his son was running it then. And then 10 years later in 1993, it was closed and they could not find it. Nobody seemed to know what had happened to them. I was sorry to lose that connection. This is Bogatanga, a small town north of Tamale before you get to the border. These are the crafts you would see. They're leather, they're like pocketbooks, hanging, various pouches, baskets that people would make. This is a craft industry of Ghana. It was a source of income for the people. In Burkina Faso, or Upper Volta, as it used to be north of here, it was a huge industry. But it's mostly a cottage industry, but it was a major source of income back then and is still a source of income today. And the crafts are just beautiful. We see more of them here now. Okay, now I've written some things here. Let me see what I wrote here. There's a tree in northern Ghana. I don't have a picture of it because it was copyrighted and licensed, but I'm gonna get this out of your way here. Baobab tree, giant trunks. They look like their roots are in the air. They're called an upside down tree, but the word means tree with fruit with many seeds. And the fruit and the leaves are full of liquid. Their leaves are succulents. They're loaded with nutrition, highly nutritious. And the trees, if you dig a hole into the trunk and dig it down, it will collect water. So these are very important for water and for nutrition, not only in northern Ghana, but across the Savannah areas. Let me see what this says. Oh, yeah, these are the animals in Ghana. The elephants were in Brangahafo, but they're also in northern Ghana, and there are now game preserves there. There was only one when I was there, but there are a lot of tourists who go there. Hippos were in the White Volta, which comes down one of the borders, the border on the west of Ghana to about midway down country, and then goes across and fills the Volta Lake, which is dammed up and was at the time the world's largest man-made lake. The massive dam damming it up was the Akasambo, and that was for hydroelectricity. They're crocodiles, they're very dangerous up in the north. They're monkeys, you see them out in the bush, but you see them even in the grasslands, they'd be running around. Termites, I'll tell you more about them. These are the marching ants you've heard about, the fire ants. Their hills are very high, maybe 15, 20 feet high, or just 4 or 5 feet high. They're hard like cement. And if they start marching through your house, just leave home for 3 to 5 days, because there's no way you can stop them. They're named fire ants because they bite, which is painful. They just can't be stopped. And they would start marching. They march 3 to 5 miles. We don't know what would set it off. And probably some scientists know. And we don't know what would stop it, why they would stop in a particular place. There used to be giraffes in northern Ghana. I did not see any, but volunteers up there did. The last giraffe was seen there in 2014. Giraffes are only seen in Niger now, which I'm going to on this trip. They are raised often in captivity and then released in the savannah down near Togo, Benin, and Nigeria. And that, I don't know how well the population of giraffes is surviving there. This is the border between Ghana, Upper Volta. It's in the shape of a stool, which was very important in the cultures of all of these, each of the cultures in Ghana. That's what the king and the queen mother would each have one, and they would sit on that. They would be ornately carved out of wood and quite beautiful. They would sell them to the tourists, but they would not be as beautiful as the ones that the kings and queens would see. So we're going here to Ouagadougou, and we're on this area here. We're going to go across the border up to here. We went to the lorry park, the transportation park, in one of the border towns, and asked if somebody was driving up to Ouagadougou. We found a man who had a Peugeot, 10 or 15 years old, that was really dilapidated, and the windshield was shattered. You couldn't see through it. So he insisted it would drive. We paid him, and he drove with his head out the window to see. We couldn't see through it. About 2 hours later, it broke down, and this was a 5 or 6 hour drive. So we waited by the side of the road. A hay truck came by, massive truck, lots of hay. There were some local farmers on it who had hitched a ride, and some children, men and women, and children. We paid and we got on, and we took the rest of the trip on the back of the hay truck and eventually landed there. This is the country we're going to, and we're going to go over to here. In this town of Ouagadougou, which means place where you can trust people, the new name Burkina Faso also means country where you can trust people. This is evidence of the French colonialists. They like to have trees in their city, so they would plant trees along the major thoroughfares. And it was nice because it would break the sun, and the sun was quite hot there. So these people are going about their business all day long, going to market, going to work, traveling from one area to another. I didn't see any green areas like I've seen in the tourist photos of lush lands during rainy season. I didn't see that while I was there. I didn't even see it in northern Ghana. I would see it down near closer to where we were in the rainforest, or on the edge of the rainforest. Now, I don't know if they were photoshopped for the tourists to attract them there, or there's been a lot of land reclamation, but there are many different groups who do land reclamation in Africa, throughout Africa. One is the Peace Corps volunteer programs, where they teach tree planting and cultivation, and they teach well digging and maintenance. And there are various degrees of success with this. If it's successful, then you might see these green, lush places. Otherwise, not. It's very hard getting spare parts. So if something broke down in the well, it might take you a year to get the part you needed in the pump. So those were the kinds of barriers to having the fresh water. It made a difference because the women did not have to carry the water so far, but they also missed going to the well where they met up with other women. Now we're going now to Niamey. And this is supposed to be through the savannah, but this is what I saw. This is Sahel. This is gravel, occasional scrub brush, bare mountains, nothing much grows there. It's very hard to cultivate anything. You might, during the rainy season, the animals might get some grass there, but it's a harsh land. It's a harsh land. That's not Sahara Desert yet, though. So there was a little of Sahel, a little of Savannah, no roads, no people, few houses, but there were a couple people here actually, but at nighttime we didn't see anyone, no towns or vehicles, no camels. They were there, but we did not see them. To get there, when we left Ouagadougou, we got up at 6 in the morning, got a lorry. The truck did not leave until 6 p.m. They told us they were leaving all day long, but they kept driving around town to pick up some more people. Later in the day, they said it was too hot to travel in the daytime. While we were traveling, we saw the land I just showed you. At nighttime, there were a lot of fires burning, and that was to burn what grass there was so that when the rains did come, they would soak into the soil, so it would be moist enough to grow something. While the fires were burning, they were making a lot of smoke, so we couldn't see the stars. The man sitting next to me on the truck, I know a little bit of French, not very much, but he was a teacher from Togo, and he was going up to Niamey to visit his family. And he told me that they navigated by the stars, but I couldn't see any stars, so I'm not sure how they were navigating. It was a strange, alluring place, sort of on the edge. But at one point, we got past the fires, and the air cleared, and then there were thousands of stars. And I'll just read you something here about that. And in the distance, the fires were burning. And there was this eerie red glow against the black sky. It was beautiful, mysterious, and strange, an unknown place, alluring, full of dramatic colors at night, perhaps dangerous. The sky was so clear we could see the Milky Way, the meteors, and the constellations. Okay. Then we had a bad experience. The border was closed. It's always closed at night. And the men, wait a minute. Let me go back here 1 second. Just want to finish this. The men got out of the truck and lay down sort of in a circle, and they would flex their hips and knees and lay their head sort of on the back of the man in front of them, and sort of have his legs and hips against theirs, and that would keep them warm, and they'd have all their robes on and their turbans. But it was cold at night because it was Harmattan. But they would be in the circle, which was warmer, and it would also protect them. So if something were coming to get them, like if there were an animal there, they would not be as enthusiastic about breaking into a group of humans there. Wait a minute. There were 5 women, frail, tiny, malnourished, on the truck, wearing black garbs. And I think one of them may have been a child, and they stayed in the corner, sat on the floor of the truck. And they did not get out when the men got out. And Genevieve and Joan and I were still sitting there deciding what we wanted to do. We first of all had to go find a toilet, which would just be the back of some building. And we would just squat there. We did do that. And when we stood up and to walk away, there were a circle of children around us giggling, and they ran off. But that was often an experience we had there. These women, though, back to the sad story, they looked fearful, said nothing. And this large man got in the truck. He greeted us, but he yelled at them. When they didn't move, he literally picked them up and threw them out of the truck one by one, just threw them, and they landed several feet down. And they scrambled away and they huddled. They weren't there in the morning. We were shocked, but he turned around very politely to us and told us in French that it'll be fine for us to stay in the truck now. Now, these are the remnants of colonialism and white privilege. We had no right to that, but he didn't want any trouble with us. And he knew what it was to deal with colonialists, that often the white privilege was there and actively working. So that was unsettling. But a few months later, I was talking, or and maybe it was back when I was in the Peace Corps house, I was talking to the men about it, and they said these were probably slaves being taken to or from market, these women dressed in black. We would not recognize that market. The Nigerians considered it not the business of white people. Nobody would engage in a conversation about that with the white people, period. This is what I've learned. Slavery is very active in Niger, as is human trafficking, which has blossomed with the difficulty trafficking on the sea. And it is one of the countries in the world with the most slavery. If a woman is a slave, all of her descendants are slaves. I'm just going to get this out of the way so I can see. I have to go back again. Wait a minute. Sorry about this. Okay. The census in 2002, 43,000 documented slaves in Niger, 50 years ago. I'm sorry, 20 years ago. The estimate is close to 900,000. This is a country of 24 million people. I'm surprised there are that many people in the statistics I read. Now, these are the efforts to get rid of slavery. It was abolished in 1960 by the French colonists. Then it was prohibited in 1999. These were the laws. And then it was criminalized in 2003. All of these get rid of slavery. And yet it is still very active there. In some parts of Niger, 75% of the population are slaves. That's a lot of slaves. Also, these slaves were drawn from the people from West Africa closer to the coast who are Black. And the Touaregs, who are deep into this slave culture and are running a lot of the slavery there, are descendants of people from the north. So they are of Arabic background and their skin is lighter. And they chose people who were darker than they were to be slaves, and they helped run the slave trade. There's also rampant domestic servitude, in which you just go grab someone on the street and lock them in your house and have them work for you. And there's just no way to control this. They don't have the resources. People, it's so much a part of the culture, people don't really understand it's going on or notice that. The weapon is to get educated so that you can run away and get a job somewhere. But the children of slaves are denied education, so they have to really run away even to get an education. Very harsh land, hard to run away. Many of the tribes, like the Tuaregs, the Hausa, and the Fulani, maybe even the Kamasi, are involved in slavery there. Despite that, we went on with our trip, and the next morning, we're still in shock out of what had happened the night before. This man comes around with a tray with this giant teapot full of hot water with spices. It looks like something out of Arabian Nights. And he says, Mademoiselle, café au lait, mademoiselle. And so we, of course, said yes. And he had these big cups with, I think you see them in the south of France. They're like a big soup bowl, but for café au lait. And the hot water was laced with cinnamon, clove, ginger, nutmeg, other spices. Something I did not recognize until just a few years ago. Now I know what it smells like is cardamom, which a lot of people in the Mideast like in their coffee. This combination of spices is popular in North Africa, and you can find recipes for how much you put in a cup of whatever. But to make your mix of this, you would use equal amounts of each ground spices. It's delicious to drink, and we watched the sunrise, which was very red because of Hamadan. Customs opened at 8 o'clock, and we started this trip again, very hot. The man in Ouagadougou was right. It's too hot to travel in the daytime, but we traveled in the daytime. Again, no roads, no landmarks, burning sun, lots of dust in the air. I got a respiratory infection while I was there because of the dust in Hamadan. Okay, so we are going to, all right, let me look at this again. So we had this long trip. We got there mid-afternoon, late afternoon, and we went to the police corps hostel, which was, a lot of the people were sleeping outside because it just never rains up there, or they went up on the roof to sleep. We were there around Christmas time, and Christmas morning around 3 a.m. there was a lot of lightning and thunder, and then this downpour that lasted 5-10 minutes, long enough to get everybody soaking wet who was outside. But everything dried off within 15 minutes because it was so dry there. But this was not the rainy season. It's just you would have these odd events. Behind the Peace Corps hostel in Niamey, you can see this place is very poor. These are eroded walls, small buildings where whole families would live. Here is another road in Niamey. It's sandy and gravelly. These are some people. A lot of these people are very thin, like this woman here. And this is sort of a typical scene you would see in a lot of these desert towns that have these flat buildings. See how it's flat? They're mud, like adobe. And the streets are sandy. And this is important because you think of the silence of sand. The camels have feet that are like big sponges, so they can get footing on the sand, but you also can't hear them. So if they're loaded down with a lot of burden, such as firewood or something like that, if you're walking, you have no idea that camels are coming. You might see somebody walking by you, but if you don't turn around to look, you will miss that camel, and they could run, their firewood could run into you and give you quite a knock on the head. So that was that. So now, something I'd like to read you about this. These are some of my experiences there. I'll just read this briefly. Just looking for this. Hold on 1 minute. The people I saw in Niamey, this fascinated me. Some of them were the most beautiful people in the world I've seen. They were very tall, a lot of them very thin, a lot of them ornately dressed in colorful robes and large turbans covered with silver bracelets and rings and necklaces, brilliantly colored shawls. They walked through the streets and alleys or rode horses or camels. Well, the women did not ride camels, the men did. They were also decorated, the horses or the camels. And the bridles, they'd walk, they took their time walking at a slow or medium pace, majestically with pride and dignity, and their heads held high. And it's as if they knew they were the most beautiful people in the world and far superior to the shorter people of a different color who did not dress in the same robes. The city was full of everything, but lots of people very colorfully dressed in very different styles because it was one of those crossroads for trade. It was also the capital, and it was a long time ago a crossroad and remains so. Some of these people would be see, the tribes would have this feudal system, which at the top of the caste system would be the nobles, then the warriors, then the religious men, then the artisans, which would be the jewelers, the blacksmiths, the people who make baskets. And below that were the slaves who had no rights. But even the artisan system had limitations on freedom and on activities. So even though we were fascinated by these people, it was very medieval in a lot of ways, and there was not a lot of liberty for a lot of the people in their tribes. These people were from out beyond the dunes, deep in the desert, a lot of them, and they knew little of our world and saw us as amusing but ugly, ignorant. They were very kind to us.
Jeannie, I'm sorry, but you're rustling papers and we can't hear your voice.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Let me just move that out of the way. Let me go back here where I was. They weren't that interested in us. We were very interested in them, and I found them fascinating. So I'm going to show you some places they were from. These are from my friends who wanted to go across the desert in 1973 as one of those life experiences crossing the Sahara Desert, which could take a month. Just going across Algeria could take 2 weeks. But this is, wait, where's this here? This is a picture of Niamey. It has another street like you would see in Ouagadougou. This is one of its sandy streets. This is Tahua, which is north of there. Not a lot of buildings, certainly not any farming going on. You see the streets there, very bare, and people dressed in their long flowing robes. This is a wall that my friend Jim, who took these pictures, slept against the night he was there. North of there is Agadez, which is 200 miles away and a 12-hour drive from Niamey through very bad roads. These people are in better economic shape. See, their camel is healthy. They have nice flowing robes. This is the market there. See, it's very bare compared to markets down in closer to the coast where you see bright, colorful fruits and vegetables. You would see like crafts down there. There would be a lot of people selling old clothes that might have been sent from the States or from Europe. They would have their spices somewhere back in here and other food. But everything is beige. The sky is beige. The wall of the city is beige. The ground is beige. It's a very desolate place and very poor. These goats look relatively happy, but you see there's a lot of clothing being sold here.
Could you try again?
Here's a man on a bicycle. Here's the mosque in Agadez. It's not very big, but it has this particular architecture. Other mosques that are larger would have several of these spires on them, maybe 100 of them if it were a large enough mosque. Sticking out from them are poles. The poles provide structure, and this is made from the local clay and mud. They also provide a ladder to climb up and wash the building off or paint it with whitewash to maintain it. This is a building. I've seen pictures of this online. I don't know what the building is, but it's beautifully decorated. It's falling apart, but it was an important building for some reason in Agadez. It may have been a wealthy person's house. This is from farther north where people with interesting clothing came from. It's up actually in the desert. These are pictures my friends took. This is the Niger River flooding. When the rains come, the rivers spread out, sometimes a mile across, and they soak the land. They also wash away a lot of the soil. This was supposed to be Savannah, but it's not. That was Sahel where we were, and that was desert I just showed you up here. Between the desert and this town called Iferwan, I'm just going to take this off here, Iferouane, in north of Agadez, very close to Algeria. This is a settlement there. It's a small one. You see there's trees, a few little scrubs out there, some grass here. So it's actually Sahel and Savannah. But this, you might see these, it might be a large family there, but they seem to be far from everything. And it was hard to know how they were making a living. Our friends went to Iferouane. They were having, because there was a festival there. And these were the people, this is kind of a blurry photograph, but they're in warrior dress, the men. And here's a better picture. This is actually a nice picture here of them in their warrior dress. Now, we would not see them dressed this way in Niamey. They would come in their long flowing robes because it's too hot to wear this on a trip from Iferouane down to Niamey. You would want to have robes to protect you and turbans to protect you. In Iferouane, this is one of the wells. People are trying to fill the water trough there for the camels. We would see these people in Niamey, many different outfits. A lot of them, these are Touaregs. They would have this black cloth over their head, or they might have one that's sort of purple black. They were called the blue people because they used indigo to dye their clothing, the shade of blue or darker blue. But the black cloth, the indigo, if the cloth was left in it long enough, it would turn this sort of purple color, dark purple. And a lot of times they would just wear the whole black veil over their head. It would keep out the sand, it would break the sunlight, and they might have something piled on top of their head under it that would create insulation. For example, I saw some of the men wearing this wooden frame over the head, sort of shaped like that, and a black cloth would be over. I saw those frames for sale in the market, but that would provide insulation from the heat, which was profound. These are other pictures from the other side. We would see people dressed like this in Niamey. I found them quite fascinating. You see this sort of purplish color on the robes. These are more colorful dress. We saw people like this in Niamey. A lot of these people are nomads, so they travel a lot. They have to keep moving. They have animals to graze, and they might come down to Niamey and camp outside of town, but they lived in tents, large tents that they would set up and take down. And then they would walk into town and they would trade. A lot of the reasons to come there were to trade animals for food or clothing or what. These are the children there. Since it was a festival, there was camel dancing. And so these are Tuaregs dancing their camels. I saw horses being danced in northern Ghana. They were doing some camel dancing outside of Niamey, but it's interesting, they get the camels to go back and forth. And they go up and down in those directions and back and forth this way. This is the Touareg region, and see how large it is. These are nomads, and while Niamey is actually here, it's very close to the Burkina Faso border. These people were nomads in this area, which goes into northern Niger, beyond more than half of Niger. This is Libya up here. This is Algeria. This is Mali, Burkina Faso. So they had a very wide area, but it's different for them now because there are more people who own land there and are trying to farm and graze. So they get into a lot of conflicts. They're not the only nomad group. They're the Hausa who tend to go across West Africa, like in a band like this, over into Sudan and over to the East Coast. This is a Touareg on the camel. We don't know, we're sure it's a man because the women, I didn't see women riding camels independently. I saw them on camels with children being transported by their families. Again, the black veil over the head. They would show their faces, but a lot of times they would just cover themselves. Another reason for this is that the Muslims objected to their photographs being taken, so you would always have to ask. And they would say no. Occasionally they would allow you to, but if they covered their heads, they felt that they were protected from you capturing their spirits. They were taught that anything that has life in it cannot have an image made of it. So you can't draw pictures or make designs with anything living. And you could not take photographs of anything that was living. Here we are in the camel park in that town. The camels are just there. That's their trough. Okay. Near here is a place called Dabou, D-A-B-O-U-S, and this is where these carvings in the stone are, 6,000 to 8,000 years old, discovered by some Frenchmen in 1987, but they were known before then. This particular one this is a male giraffe and is 20 feet tall. Then the female giraffe is over here. They have been vandalized, and so replicas were made and placed outdoors in Agadez, but they're endangered. There's the Bradshaw Foundation is devoted to, they have to saving these and preserving them. And they, not now that the terrorists are there, they used to have trips there and you could go and go up close to the drawings that are inside the caves there. This is Ingle. This is an experience that would happen. These were the flash floods I was telling you about. This is what happens if you try to go across the desert after the flash flood. You get stuck in the mud. My friend Jim was stuck here with this truck for 3 days. These are some people traveling. See how their heads are wrapped up to protect them. We would also see this down in Niamey. Just another truck. This is a sandstorm in Agadez at the airport. Pretty profound. It's near evening. This is what a daytime sandstorm looked like, someplace around northern Niger or Algeria. It's red because the sand and the mud had a red cast, sort of like the Georgia red clay. This would be the red clay of areas of the desert, but you can't see anything. This is daytime, and so they would just have to stop the truck and wait until it cleared out. This is someone stuck trying to go across the desert, stuck in the sand. This is my friend Vincent, who took a trip with his friend Clark from the mountains where those petroglyphs, those prehistoric rock carvings were. They hired these guides and who had these camels. These camels are healthy. Now there was a famine going on in 1973 in Niger, and I will show you some camels who are not healthy. He is wrapping his head up the way the Tuaregs wrap theirs, and he has these flowing robes on, which with all the air spaces with many layers, it would insulate you from the heat, these robes. They wrap this under their chin, they wrap this around their head and more, and then there would be a veil they would put across there to keep the sand out. These camels are not healthy. This was during the famine in a place where people did not have money to feed them. And there was nothing growing. And there was water there, but these are not healthy during the famine. As far as the giraffes, it is again the only country where there are giraffes, and they release them into the savannah after they raise them. So now we're going from into Benin, which used to be Dahomey, from Niger. We went on a truck like this into areas like this. And we got to the border, and it took us an hour and a half to get through customs. Nobody else was going through the border, but this often happened. And I learned later they wanted us to pay them money to let them through the border. So that's why we were held up. Our transportation deserted us. That was not an unusual experience. There was no hotel or restaurant. The toilet was just, it was a wall behind the police station. So we were stuck there. We needed a place to sleep. And one of the men at the Peace Corps hostel had told me that he had slept in the jail when he was there. So I asked the policeman if we could sleep in the jail. And he said, "What do you want to do that for?" We said, "Well, we don't have any place. We think we'll be safer there. And if you could give us the key and we'll pay you." And he said, "Okay." Now he was agreeable to that. So we went back to the jail cell, and we put our backpacks in there and locked the door, and then we paid him. And then we went outside to see if we could talk to somebody into cooking us some food. A nice man was there who identified himself as a teacher. And we said, "You know a place to eat?" And he said, "I know a woman who will cook for you." So he walked us there, and it took us an hour to walk there. And then she agreed to this. It was probably his wife or his sister. And that took another hour and a half because she had to go catch the chicken and feather it and butcher it and then cook the stew. And it was absolutely delicious. And so we were very grateful for this, and we paid them, both of them individually. We paid them generously. And the man walked us back to the jail. So what is this about? At 3 a.m, we were awakened by the policeman who told us, now we didn't get to bed till midnight. He told us we had to go because there was a truck out there and one wasn't coming for 3 days. So we jumped up, grabbed our backpacks, handed him the key, and got into the front seat. There were 2 giant men in the front seat. The people were very tall, and a lot of them were big, like big shoulders, and they have all these ropes on. So 3 tall women got into the front seat between them. It was a miserable trip. We broke down after an hour. We'd only gone 20 miles. Genevieve and Joan were upset. Joan was so upset that she went over the bushes to throw up. I said, Joan, it's going to be fine. I'm going to get in the back. In the back were other travelers. There were men, women, and children there. There might have been a couple of goats, and they had all their bundles with them. I got into the back of this big truck, and there was sort of a troublemaker sitting beside me, and he started some kind of game in which they threw stones into the center. I don't know what it was, but he accused somebody of cheating him, and they got into a fight. They both pulled knives, and I was wondering what was going to happen. But the other men jumped in and told him to stop it, and took their knives away from them, put them each in a corner, and I didn't see them give their knives back. I think they were going to keep them until the trip was over. But another few hours, I got out and got back in the front because I just didn't feel really safe back there. We went to this place, which is a third of the way to the coast. And it did not look like this. This is the rainy season. But it took us about 12 hours on this train ride, and it got progressively humid. And then that's pretty much the end of the trip. We did go to see some of these wall hangings or the artwork there, which is applique. If you do quilting, you know about that. This is one style. This is from my friend Ed, who sent me this photograph. It's quite beautiful. If you were at the MFA and saw the quilts that Harriet Powers did, you see she had these figures in blocks. Was telling stories about the quilt. The quilt I bought had the story of slavery, of the slaves being captured, and it was like 3 lines of people, and so it was quite beautiful. They also had a lot of wood carvings, beautiful statues of heads that were made of ebony, and they had brass work there. These, I read about these in the Wall Street Journal. These have been at the MFA for decades. They are being returned to Mali because of a lot of negotiation over the years to get them back. They're very valuable to the people of Mali. These two are from, well, this one is from Mali. They are in an exhibit at an art institute in Cincinnati right now. And this is a fertility doll from Ivory Coast. Also carving that's in that same exhibit. And then from there, we went back to Ghana because it was on the coast. Didn't take very long. This is my friend Vincent in the middle of the Algerian desert reading The Little Prince. He's a real romantic, sitting in a dune. And we all love that photograph. This is me on a camel in the camel park in Niamey. So there's more I can tell you about, but I think I should stop and see if there's anything you would like to know. The only other thing I was going to tell you about was the terrorism there, which has changed the entire landscape. I could not go to any of these places now. None of us could go there. It's very, very dangerous. They're full of terrorists. But if there's more you would like to know, please ask me. I'd be glad to share it with you.
Jean,
Yes.
Jean Mooney has asked 2 questions in the chat. So Jean Mooney, do you want to unmute yourself and just ask them in person?
Sure. Let's see. Am I there? So Jeannie, had you read the book Homecoming?
Yes, I read it a few years ago, and yeah, I did. It was a wonderful book.
Yeah, I thought that was great. So it reminded me of that whole area. And then, so could you clarify, was this trip that you all one continuous trip that you just described, and over how many days was this?
Well, it was 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay, so you took time off from doing your quote unquote, whatever work, whatever, and this was just, you all ventured off for 3 weeks?
Yes, because we were teaching school. So we had 6 weeks off between the terms at Christmas time. And so it was fine for us to go. I mean, we couldn't have done it while we were teaching. And this trip was interesting to me because I had known so many other volunteers who had taken it, and they just said, you've got to do it. There are other trips I missed. For example, I recall this being very colorful with people, very exotic people. Northern Nigeria in Kano, the volunteers raved about the colorful clothing, the crafts work, the people they met, and I did not make it there. I made it to Western Nigeria, to where the Yoruba were, and it was incredibly crowded. I think Ibadan is at the time, 50 years ago, was the most densely crowded city in the world. As far as Homecoming, I read a book by, I think, Nora Zeal Hurston, the story that it was from an anthropologist perspective. She used the language that he used, which was his Pidgin English, and he described his life, which was heartbreaking. He was in the Yoruba tribe in Western Nigeria, and people from Dahomey, that was a big slave trading area, went over into his territory and kidnapped him and like 25 other men and sold them as slaves. And he goes by that step by step, and he spent the rest of his life yearning to go back to Africa, which he was never allowed.
What was that, Jeannie?
I think it's Cudjoe, but it's a book by Nora Zeal, is it Hurston, who was an anthropologist and did a lot of work in the early 1900s and wrote this book, I think in 1927. And it's been republished. I found it up at the Belmont bookstore several years ago when it was promoting books by African authors, and read it. And it was fascinating. It was heartbreaking because he married a woman he dearly loved. She and all 6 of his children died before he did, and he was left alone. But he and Nora Ziel-Hurston became good friends. And I think she was the bright spot in his life at the end of his days, because she really showed a lot of respect for him, what he knew, what had happened to him that was devastating, and she wanted people to know about it, and she preserved that. So
Could I clarify something? I
Yes.
wrote it up. I wrote it up in the chat. It said I wanted to point out that with the so-called First French Revolution in 1794, slavery was abolished all over whatever possession France had. Under Napoleon, unfortunately, Napoleon reinstated slavery in Haiti. But as far as Africa, all African places were declared free from slavery in 1848. And then in 1960, you had independence given to those states. And in this particular case of Niger, what has happened is that the slavery had been forbidden since 1848, but they continued on their own. So when they became independent, they immediately decided to make a law to create it, to make it illegal. But theoretically, it had been illegal, but it continued, and it probably does continue now also.
yeah. Yeah, it's really sad. I didn't know that about the 1848 law of the French colonists. I did read that, and I think the British did this as well, and the Americans did this wherever they turned a blind eye to it, because they could control people that way by befriending the noble classes. They could control them, who would then, by befriending them, who would then control the classes beneath them. And also, they were not going to give up their slaves. People realized the nobles could not survive without their slaves, because who would do all their work? They were the nobles of each of these tribes were the tall, proud people walking through the streets, who walked very slowly with their heads held high and didn't have much time for us. But a lot of this I've learned since I left Africa. And it's just interesting to me how little we knew, and how unprepared we were for slavery. It also taught me, now that I am more aware of this, and at 22, I wasn't very aware of this, of how protected we were through this sense of white privilege, that we didn't get reprimanded for things that were illegal. Occasionally, like there were Peace Corps volunteers who were dealing dope, and they got caught and put in jail, and had their exit from Ghana delayed. But we used to trade money in the markets. The money changers were there because we didn't want to pay the cost of it in the banks. And I think, what were we thinking? Not only the danger to us, but how disrespectful. We would go into the markets and we would see the men holding all these bundles of bills, and we'd go up and we'd get an exchange for dollars and then go off and spend our money. We do things like that. And I look back on it and I think, we just hadn't a clue. We just did not have a clue of what was going on.
The exchange of money, the way you mentioned, is done all over the world. You go to
I
Brazil,
know.
they do that, and it's privilege of certain classes.
It is.
And it's not, it's in some cases white, some cases it's just caste, some whatever it is. And there's slavery going on right now in the Middle East.
Yeah. One of the reasons the trafficking moved into Africa was that there was not so much trafficking through the Sahara. was more out on the high seas and overland. But they found, now there's a lot of trafficking there now, but they could engage the Tuaregs or the nomads to help them, guide them through the desert and hire them to protect them. And since slavery was part of their cultures, they had no objection to this. And now there are terrible things going on in the Sahara. The migrants who are trying to escape, who we see drowning in the Mediterranean. What happens is, see, when you go across the desert, you pay someone for transport, food, and water. It's a package deal. You don't say, well, I'll take the transport and bring my own water. It's a package deal if you hire somebody to do this for you. Those people would pay. They drive them 100 miles into the desert, into the sand dunes, put them off the truck at gunpoint and leave them there. And the Algerians have found, 80 people dead there, 20 dead there, 100 dead someplace else. They leave them there and they die. And it's horrible. These are the people who don't even make it to the Mediterranean, where a lot of them drowned. It's a very terrible thing going on. I can show you a little bit about this. I don't know, this is the terrorism, which has really increased. There's a book I would like all of you to read if you have the opportunity, called The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu. Now, this title does it a great disservice. This is a well-researched book. There are lots of references to the history of Islam in Africa, which is quite informative. For example, Timbuktu and Gao were centers of learning. There were lots of libraries there back in 1200, 1100. And people would come from Spain and the Mideast, and Palermo was another center like that in Sicily, and they would take camels across the desert to come there to study, to learn, to write, and to learn and to write. Gao, G-A-O, was another one of those centers, which is not, relatively speaking, it's not that far from Timbuktu, but both of them are on the Niger River, which starts down in the highlands of New Guinea and then comes up north and does a great bend between Timbuktu and Gao. And those were, I remember my father talking about, the cities and the libraries that were there. This book is an example of how, when the terrorists came, the Islamic fundamentalists, and they do a terrible disservice to Islam, but they came in to destroy the libraries. And it was about a man who was a librarian there and who developed an interest in old manuscripts. As it turns out, since the Middle Ages, people of the desert, the nomads, since the libraries fell into disrepair centuries ago, they have been carrying these manuscripts with them as guardians of them for centuries. And some of them have fallen in great disrepair. Some of them have survived. And this librarian was able to preserve many of those manuscripts. And through his cunning, which the United States, who was supplying money for this, did not like, but he knew the system in Africa, and he knew everybody he needed to know, and he had lots of relatives. They transported those documents down to Bamako in southern Mali, and they just smuggled them through. They took them by boat down the Niger River. They took them overland. They bribed the customs officials. They bribed people all along the way, but they knew that was the system. And in their system, that's not considered a bribe in West Africa. It's called the Daesh system. If you bargain, everybody has to bargain. If you get the price you want or close to it, you are expected to dash somebody, to give them money. That's the system. You're supposed to show your gratitude. So you do that. And if you don't, then you're not a popular person. I mean, it's disrespectful not to. And so he knew that these people who were allowing him through, and he'd pay them money, that was the way he was going to get through. And he helped save 350,000 documents, which is a lot of documents to save in the middle of these terrorists who, they came in, they just started killing people. They moved into the library, shut it down. He had managed to hide a lot of those behind closed doors. They were still in the library, but nobody could see the writing. It was the writing they objected to. Anything that showed education or learning, they would destroy. They would destroy. If women weren't wearing veils, they killed them. It was terrible. And all throughout West Africa, I didn't see women wearing veils. Now, you'll see them with the tight cloth around here now. I think Judith could speak more to this. But 50 years ago, we didn't see that. Also, the women managed the money. They ran the markets. And the fundamentalists were promoting that the women go home, stay home, and not come out and not have any money. And it just didn't go over there because the men were out farming and doing other things. The women were doing the trading. They had a system that worked for them. And while it was not an egalitarian system, it was much more egalitarian than in fundamentalist religions. And the women were very, very efficient at running the markets and managing the money. And they still are, like in Ghana, but it depends on where you are in the Sahara. I can show you these places here. This is where the activity is very bad. Well, that's, up here, that's where I was running around up there and traveling. It's, there's no way we could go there now. They go into the fields and just shoot the farmers dead. The farmers, if they go into their fields now, they don't go till 9 in the morning and leave at 3. They can't get their work done in that time. They have 12 hours of daylight, and they got to get it done in that time. So these terrorists are concentrated in Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Chad. This is a better map. You can see this better. These darker areas are where the attacks have been worse. And over here, over in Nigeria, where into Chad is where Boko Haram are. They have gone into Niger. They're kidnapping people. But the terrorists are in a lot of these areas further east than this. They have not been in Ghana yet, but there are cells there, and they will come at some point. But Ghana is a democratic country that's more efficiently run and wealthier than a lot of surrounding countries. They have more resources, but they will probably at some point be hit with some of this fallout. But I could ask Judith that. Judith, where are you? Could you respond to any of that? You might have to unmute yourself.
So yeah, Jeannie is correct in that Ghana also has, for better or for worse, a very large U.S. presence, and it's in the U.S. interest to be there. So it is one of the largest U.S. embassies in West Africa with over 3,000 employees. It's a massive structure. Whereas if you go to some of these other places, the embassies are very small with very few people that are working in it. And so the U.S. considers that they're really, there's a huge push to keep this military relationship going for some pretty interesting reasons. So it's hard to say. I think poverty has a great deal to play in this. Decentralized governments, governments that, and the U.S. has a part in all of this. A lot of these places have had coups. They've tried very hard to have democratic governments. They've tried very hard to have self-rule. But U.S. and Europe it's complicated. And so their chaos is not all their fault. The U.S. has a huge hand in this whole thing. And I'll say one of the things I wanted to point out is that all of this area, if you start up with somewhere around about Senegal, Guinea, Sierra Leone, all the way down, all of that is West Africa. And these were not countries during the time of slavery. These were regions, and they were run by tribes. So most African Americans, most Africans in the Caribbean and South America come from these areas. We all, and it's really interesting. Ancestry.com is probably been a big promoter of, you know, getting your blood done, and everyone comes from these areas, and because everyone belongs to at least 3 basic tribes. And then colonialization came along, and then they carved them up and made them into countries. But all these people at some point all have the same blood. It's kind of interesting because in order to survive, once slavery, the main root of slavery happened, you know, you're talking about 10 million people taken out of this area. And so who's left but old people and babies? They had to band together to survive. And then colonialization comes along and then carves them up again. And so it's a complicated, Africa has a complicated history. And it's interesting. But in Ghana, I don't know what's going to happen in terms of Islam. Right now, they got a government that's not in great shape. It's still a safer country than the others. They are watching the Islamic groups that are coming in, but because it has compared to everyone else, it has a pretty strong economy, although its own economy is dropping. When I started going there in 2010, the exchange rate was like 2 CDs to the dollar. Yesterday, I heard it was 7.5 CDs to the dollar. The average person is struggling, and it's not good. And that just makes way for these groups. So I would say the nation is probably half Christian, half Muslim of sorts, but they're not fundamentalists. You do see some women in burqas, but women are traders. You're absolutely right about that. They rule the roost when it comes to the money. And so there's certain things they're going to do and not do, and men accept that. So it makes it really hard for them in some of the other Islamic societies. But, you know, it's changing. When people get poor, when people don't have a roof over their heads and can't eat, all sorts of things can happen. So, yeah.
Are you going back?
Probably. I was going at least 2 or 3 times a year. I went in, I usually go February, March, and then October, November every year. And then in 2020, I was there, and they closed the borders. And so it took me a while to get back at the beginning of the pandemic. And so I didn't go anymore until this past fall. And this past fall I went, and I didn't stay very long. It was just tiring. The place felt chaotic, and I didn't stay very long. I work in a health clinic there, but I didn't plan my usual March trip, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do come summer and next fall in terms of going. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet.
Well, thank you very much. It's been most informative. Thank you, Jean, and thank you, Judith. It gives a lot of things to think about.
Thank you, Judith. I really appreciate
Oh,
your
thank you. It was great seeing these pictures. That especially the older pictures of Ghana. They're pretty amazing. I mean, now they have high rises, Jeannie. I tell you, there are high rises everywhere, and they're unbuilt buildings. It's kind of like people run out of money and they stop building, and then one day somebody comes along and starts building on them again. It's so
they even have malls. They have malls now.
Oh, they do. We do.
Yes,
they do.
yes,
They have
yes.
malls. They have malls. And they have that area where you said it was downtown Accra. That was, I swear that's Osu, and that same street still exists, because I don't know, the buildings still look the same, but it's even more crowded now. So yeah.
Well, I think we may have to stop because of the time, although we could have gone forever. It's very interesting. And I'm really very grateful for both of you to present this. Thank you. And thank you, Jeannie. And thank you, Judith. I'd like to encourage you to come to the next Alliance meeting if you wish to, on the second Thursday of next month. And it will be about a similar kind of evolution, sort of, but it's within the US. Two friends of mine are photographers, and they're showing Kansas now, how it's changed with the changes in the economics and so forth. So please feel free to come and join. Would be very nice.